Actually, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be here tonight. I first came here in June of 2015, and what you're going to see tonight, most of it I've learned myself since June of 2015. I have found what I want to do in semi-retirement, and that's pursue the family history. I just have to work out the semi part, which I haven't been able to achieve yet. But it's a real privilege for me to be here tonight, and it's so nice to see so many of my relatives in the crowd, and I know I'm speaking to people who are very interested in the history of Richmond and this area. I titled this A Window into My Ancestors in Earlier Time, and I dedicated it to my twin brother, Robert Breck Moran. Unfortunately, he passed away June 6th of this year, just a few months ago. So I've dedicated it to him, and you'll see a couple pictures at the end. In 1930, my grandmother, the wife of Hugh II, she had gone to Europe the year before in 1929, and she had followed up on the Rhodes side of the family and the Hornby side of the family. And Sir Francis Rhodes, he had built Marlborough Hall in 1583, which I hope to see someday. When she came back, she spoke to a group of women at Cornell where Hugh II was the head of theology, and there's a 21-page letter, but I'm just reading you one line. She said, referring to my grandfather, his branch ventured in the 17th century into the wilderness of Virginia and afterwards to Kentucky in the days of Daniel Boone. Also, the page on the right is a page from the Breck Bible. At Christmas, 1846, Dr. Joseph Wilson, the father of the U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, he was a classmate in theology at Princeton with Robert Levi Breck, and he gave the Breck, what we call the Breck Bible, to Robert Levi Breck as a Christmas present. And Joseph Wilson was also a groomsman for Robert Levi Breck when he married Martha Rhodes at Woodlawn in 1847. Woodlawn was a wedding gift from Green Clay to Colonel William, and he was referred to as Billy also, Rhodes, born in 1794, and he married Paulina Green Clay in 1819. Our family had come, the Morans, John Cleveland Moran and Betsy Barnett Moran, had come with the Barnetts from Albemarle County, Virginia, and they brought millstones with them. And this is a picture of a millstone that I took in 2015 where the family home was called Stonehenge. This millstone is now in Millstone Park, and I saw it this morning. And you'll see some more pictures soon. But imagine bringing millstones from Virginia to Kentucky in the 1790s. As Matt Cox says, collecting millstones isn't for sissies. So John Cleveland Moran was born in 1763, and his wife Betsy Barnett was born in 1765. They both died the same night, August 20th, 1835, probably of a fever. Here's another picture of the millstone, and this is again from my first trip to Kentucky in 2015, and that's when my Moran family history passion evolved. And as my wife Sandy says, Hugh, you can't spend all your time in the past, but I have to admit I really enjoyed it. Here's another picture of the millstone, and you see the center hole. And then this is a picture when I was behind the millstone at the site that Dean described, where Stonehenge was between 52 and 595 off of 1295. This is a family tree. I'm just showing you a couple things. This goes from me back to Nathan Montgomery Moran, my second great grandfather. This is from Nathan Montgomery Moran. This is on Ancestry.com. Goes back to John Cleveland Moran and his father, John Moran, 1776. He died. My third and fourth great grandfathers, both from Albemarle County, Virginia. This is on my on the mother of Hugh the First was Mary Jane Anderson, and this takes that side of the family from Mary Jane Anderson back to John Anderson, who was born in Ireland in 1707 and died in 1786. And then, as Dean said, there's also the Robert Levi Brecht side of the family. So this takes you from Robert Levi Brecht back to General Levi Todd. And General Levi Todd was the grandfather of Mary Todd Lincoln. And Mary Todd Lincoln's father, Robert Todd, his sister was Jane Briggs Todd, and that's my third great-grandmother. So General Levi Todd was born in 1756, died in 1807. And then this also takes you back to Margaret Logan, because I'm a relative of Benjamin Logan. This page in Ancestry.com history takes you from Martha Green Rhodes, and she was the daughter of Colonel William Rhodes and Pauline Clay Rhodes. Takes you back to Green Clay and John Rhodes, and back to Virginia. 1797 was John Rhodes, and he lived until 1775. And then this also, I wanted to give you various sources, but from this is from the Madison County Cemetery records, and this is for the James Barnett Cemetery, which is on the Witt property off of the 52 right above Silver Creek. And I put Moran because we have Morans in there, and on page 2 here you can see that John Cleveland Moran and Betsy Barnett Moran are get this right. Anyway, they're listed there in the bottom of the part of the top section, and they both died, like I said, the same night, August 20th, 1835. And I read a letter recently from Nathan Montgomery Moran, who was a great uncle I never met, and he was writing a letter to my grandfather, and he was wondering whether John Cleveland Moran and Elizabeth Betsy Barnett Moran were married in Virginia or in Kentucky. But you can see here from the Madison County marriages that they were married September 15th, 1789 in Madison County. And then I have a cousin who's now deceased. He was born in 1910. But he came here in the 60s, and he and his wife did a hand-drawn map of the Barnett Cemetery, and he gave me a copy of it. And so I brought that copy here in 2015 looking for the gravestones of John Cleveland Moran and Betsy Barnett Moran. They were under about 4 or 5 inches of ground cover and topsoil. It took another year or so to find the gravestones, but it's the way it's indicated, they're right near an elm tree. So that same elm tree we eventually found the perspective from the elm tree to dig them up. And it was my cousin Jim Ferguson who actually should receive all the credit for that. These are the 2 gravestones. They're side by side. The first one says, in memory of John C. Moran, John Cleveland Moran, born January 1st, 1763, died August 20th, 1835. And the right one, and they are side by side, it says, in memory of Elizabeth Moran, born February 3rd, 1765, died the same night, August 20th, 1835. This is the gravestone. This is the one on the left side. This is for John Cleveland Moran. Again, it's right there at the 52, and it's on the Witt property. John Cleveland Moran and Betsy Barnett Moran had 7 sons and 1 daughter. The daughter, Mary, was the second child, and Nathan Montgomery Moran, my great-great-grandfather, was the 4th child. This is from the sectional records of Silver Creek Presbyterian Church that were transcribed, and it lists Brother John Moran, that'd be John Cleveland Moran, in 1790, and then later on it lists him as an elder of the church.
There's Sydney.
This is another picture of the gravestone, and again, I'm just indicating they passed the same night. You can read the inscriptions perfectly on the stones. And you can see there on the right, it says in memory of John C. Moran. It has the birth date January 1, 1763, and died August 20th, 1835. So very well preserved under topsoil and ground cover. This is a picture from 2018. You see the elm tree there, and that's my cousin Betsy. She's here tonight, and she's been the one helping me discover the cemetery and along with some other cousins, unearth the gravestones. So now I know where they are. And that's Betsy Moran, Arbuckle, Shackelford. The interesting thing is, John Cleveland Moran and Betsy Barnett Moran, they are actually the fourth great-grandparents for Betsy and the third great-grandparents for me. And I'm 10 months older than Betsy, but they just had kids faster on her side of the family. So, this is another cemetery. It's known as the Samuel Campbell Cemetery, and there's also Morans buried there. And I'll be showing you a Campbell dresser a little bit later, and so you'll see a lot of Campbells there. And we have cleared the cemetery, and we need to keep it up, but that's close by. This is from there's a chronology that the Madison County Historical Society has put out, and it's from 1790 all the way up to 1900. And this is a section of it, and on this page it lists the Presbyterian Church at Old Round Top, constituted at Silver Creek 1790. This is the Campbell dresser, and this is my sock dresser at home in California, and I knew it was something really old, and I knew it was the oldest piece that my family had. And it's been lots of places, but I'm really enjoying having it myself. These Campbell dressers, as my friend Matt Cox said, he said there were 17 known to be in existence. This is the only one that is in this configuration. And when I say this configuration, I'm not very good at this part, the two drawers at the top side by side, that's the only one in that configuration. And then Mac helped me get the rosettes and bales to restore it. And when I was finished, it had just a knob in the center. And Mac said, well, where the bale comes down and it hits the drawer, is there a mark there? I said, yeah, there is. And he said, well, that's because that's what it had originally. It had the bales, and that's where they hit the drawer. Also, most of these dressers don't have the legs. The legs have broken off over the years. Because, keep in mind, this is almost 220 years old. And I have all the legs, and only one of them has been repaired. The other three are fine. So this is something I'm very proud of. This is a four-poster bed that I have at my office in California. And this is the bed from John Cleveland Moran and Betsy Barnett Moran. I believe it goes back to approximately 1830. And a lot of people were probably born and died in this bed. I really appreciate it. It's got 9-foot posts. The posts are 9 inches square at the bottom, and it's burl walnut, and it's from Kentucky. It's been all over the world, and it was also sent as household furniture on a cargo ship to China in 1912, and my father was born on the bed in Shanghai in 1912, where my grandfather was a missionary. And then it came back, and it was in New York, it was in Alabama, it was in New York City, and eventually went back to Palo Alto and then to me. Now, at the time Hugh the First died in 1886, they had several auctions, and one of the auctions, they were going to auction this four-poster bed, which is massive. And my grandfather, who was only 4 years old when his father died, he told his mother he wanted to keep it in the family. He didn't want to sell it because he remembered jumping on it and playing on it. And a woman had bid 50 cents for the four-poster bed and was very displeased when she didn't get it. So it's still in the family, and very much enjoyed. This is just another picture, 9-foot post, 9 inches square. There you can see the headboard. And this is Nathan Montgomery Moran. He's the fourth son of John Cleveland Moran and Betsy Barnett Moran. He's the father of Hugh the First. He was born in 1803, and he died in 1874 at age 71. And maybe one of the reasons Hugh the First was an only child is he was 18 years older than his wife. So, There's an oil painting. Just in the last week or so, my first cousins have taken pity on me and actually sent me nice pictures of oil paintings that we still have in the family. And this is Nathan Montgomery Moran. There's another small portrait of Nathan Montgomery Moran. And then here's another card, and my aunt had written there, Nathan Montgomery Moran, father of Hugh I, Silver Creek, Kentucky. This is his wife. This is Mary Jane Anderson Moran. She was, like I said, she was born in 1821, so she was 18 years younger than her husband. And I didn't have a nice picture, but I just got this nice picture. And one of my cousins who lives in Brooklyn, New York, she had this picture and the one of Nathan Montgomery Moran. Previous to that, I just had this picture, but I could recognize her in both pictures. She died in 1877, and she was 56 years old at the time. And their son, Hugh I, and I'm Hugh IV in a direct line, was an only child, as I mentioned. Now you'll see a misspelling here because the name is Morans, but this you'll see several spellings of our name in the talk tonight. And at that time, from my understanding, only about 5% of the population could read or write, and it was usually clergy and maybe college professors, people like that. This is from the Madison County Historical Society again, and this is from 1852, and it said Moran's Mill at Mill Grove burned. And so that what I tried to do is bring in other sources to corroborate what I was saying. Also, when I came here in 2015, I kind of wondered, well, did my relatives support the South or support the North, or what was the story? And I didn't really want to ask anybody because I didn't want to offend anybody. But there's a book that I've read. It's called, and I got it through the Madison County Historical Society, and it's called "When the Wright Pairs Fell: The Battle of Richmond, Kentucky" by D. Warren Lambert, August 29th to August 30th. And at the very bottom it says, James Moran brought supplies for both sides. Nathan Moran, which would be his brother and my second great-grandfather, probably took his to the Southerners only. So that kind of gave me an idea of where the sympathies were. This is a bedroom suite that was made by Nathan Montgomery Moran between 1860 and 1865. It was made by J.W. Davis and Company out of Louisville. And the story I was told was Nathan Montgomery Moran selected the burl walnut trees to cut down, have floated down the Ohio River to Louisville, and have the bedroom suite made. So this is, as you see, it has matching tops for the mirror, the bed, and also the armoire. And there's serpents on both sides. There's a trophy cup in the center. And then the dresser on the left has an 8-foot mirror on top of it, so you can see the size of it. And then there's a nightstand on the right, or a commode. And then there's also a wash basin. Here's another picture in different light. But you can see there's a better picture of the serpents on top and the trophy cups. And I was told, I had a cousin who passed away, and he had this bedroom suite in New York City, and I was told that I needed a 14-foot ceiling to accommodate this. So when we remodeled our house, we put in an 18-foot ceiling upstairs, and we put in a 20-foot ceiling downstairs. And my wife Sandy said, "Now, we're not just doing this for your relatives, are we?" But you can see how beautiful the furniture is. And the wash basin on the right, the reason I took a side view is I'm still restoring one drawer, but I've restored the rest of the bedroom suite. Another picture. And this is the armoire that I just finished restoring downstairs, where we had the 20-foot ceiling. And you can see it has the serpents on both sides and the trophy cup and the burl walnut in the center sections. And that it's, J.W. Davis was the person who made it, and it's stenciled on the back of the pieces. And it's interesting because finally in the last week I've gotten my cousins interested. They're actually turning over tables and going behind furniture and looking for names, and they found some very interesting things. It took me 2 or 3 years to get them interested, but once they knew they had a deadline, they actually gave me some nice pictures. This picture It's in the Brennan House in Louisville, and it's what they call the Centennial bed, made by the same person, J.W. Davis. Very spectacular, but you can notice with the finials on the top, on both sides, and with the serpents on both sides at the top, and it's not a trophy cut, but the carvings on top, and the burl walnut in the center, and then down below, where you can see the on both sides, the pieces that come out match the bed that I have, and also the footboard. It has some similarities, but this is much more ornate. And according to the Brennan House Museum, they said they found it in a drawer. They couldn't prove it, but they found in a drawer that this Centennial bedroom suite won first prize in 1876 at an exposition in Philadelphia. And Sandy and I, when we were first here, I wrote ahead, sent the Brennan House pictures of my bedroom suite, told them it was by the same person. They don't normally have tours, but with a donation we were able to get in there, and I was able to take pictures also. So anyway, this is the Centennial bed made by the same person. Then I have a cousin in Brooklyn, and she has this armoire that she had restored. You can see the burl walnut, you can see a lot of the similarities, the two drawers side by side at the bottom, the curvature at the top, the very top is a little bit different, but she said it was in my cousin's barn in Washington, and she rescued it from the barn, had it restored, and she has it in her 1870 brownstone in Brooklyn. And I told her to look behind and see if it says J.W. Davis and Company. There's another picture at the top, the bottom, and the locks. And so it's very similar to the one that I have. Okay, at this point you're probably thinking, well, Hugh just got everything off the internet and he's just showing you stuff from the internet. But it's not true. So this is a gold watch. It's an 18-karat yellow gold watch, and it's inscribed Hugh A. Moran from his father, 1865. Hugh the First would have been 16 then, so I'm conjecturing that it was a 16th birthday gift. And it's a very beautiful watch. And my mother, who was the original sentimental person, said, Hugh, it doesn't work. I've tried to get it fixed, but someday if you want, you could sell it for the gold, which I can assure you I'd be homeless with this watch. And it's just another description. That's a picture of the outside, and then this is a picture of the inside, and it was made by James Stoddard, 13 Lion Street, London, and then even has a zip code there. So I looked it up, but I couldn't find any image of that at this time. So Hugh the First, he went to Washington College, which later became Washington and Lee. He graduated in 1869. He was 6'6". His nickname was Rufus for his red beard, and he's the gentleman on the left. That picture was taken in 1869 when he was at Washington, which is now Washington and Lee. During the Civil War, Nathan Montgomery Moran had slaves who signed up at Camp Nelson to fight for the North. And after the war, again there's some misspelling here, after the war, Nathan Montgomery Moran was allowed to apply for reimbursement for the compensation because his slaves fought for the North during the war. So you can see this slave's name was Alexander Moran, different Moran spelling, and the slaves would always take the name of the slave owner. There's 5 sides to these documents. This is the second one. You have to have a claim. You have to show a proof of ownership. You have to have the details of the claim. You have to have an endorsement. That you're the person making this claim, proving who you are. And then this is the second one, and it was for William Moran. Yet again, another spelling of Moran. So it's M-O-R-A-N, but if you'll see 4 spellings here. And this is the second document for the slave William Moran, who enlisted at Camp Nelson during the Civil War. And again, you have the claim, you have proof of ownership, you have the details of it, and you've got got an endorsement. And this one actually has the stamps on it also. Okay, Hugh the First, he went to Washington and what is now Washington and Lee. And his father, Nathan Montgomery Moran, in 1868 sent 3 cheeses to his son at college. And he said, please give the small one to General Lee. So when I just was reading letters and I came across this, and I was stunned. And but he numbered them for one for Mrs. Barclay, a second one for General Lee, and a third one for Colonel Johnson. And he said these are bluegrass cheeses, and he said present one of the small ones to General Lee. And I thought that was fascinating, because at the end of the Civil War, typically Robert E. Lee, when they lost the war, he would turn his sword over to Ulysses S. Grant and turn over his pistol and hang his head. But Ulysses S. Grant said no, he wouldn't take the sword, he wouldn't take anything from General Lee, and he said, just you and your troops go home and go back to a normal life with your families. And at that time, Robert E. Lee became president of what is now Washington and Lee University, and he was the president until he passed away in 1871. So from 1865 to 1871, he was the president, and he is buried in the crypt underneath Lee Chapel at the university along with his family. That's just the second page of the letter, and this is why the reason I have this is after Hugh the First graduated from Washington College. It was a few years later, but in 1873, he went off to Europe. And he was in England and the rest of Great Britain. He went to Greece and went to Palestine. And while he was over there, his father, Nathan Montgomery Moran, got ill, and he couldn't get back in time before his father passed away. But his father had made him promise to build stone hedges around the property, which was 14 miles. Of stone hedges. And when Hugh the First visited Stonehenge in England, he decided to call the property Stonehenge as a play on words after visiting England. This is the diploma from 1869 from Washington College, and it's in Latin, but I have the original diploma. And you can still read the ink, and it says, Hugh A. Moran, 1869. When Nathan Montgomery Moran passed away, they purchased the Moran plot in the Richmond Cemetery. And so this is Nathan Montgomery Moran, the father of Hugh the First. And again, he died in 1874. To the right is the gravestone for Mary Jane Anderson, the mother of Hugh the First, in the Moran plot. She died in 1877. This is the actual telegram, which I have these actual documents, and I have them here tonight. This is the telegram that Hugh the First sent to a relative, and he said, "Mother died this evening at 4:30, H.A. Moran for Hugh Anderson Moran." And that was in 1877. And I just think it's fascinating. My grandfather said that he came from a family of pack rats. And when my cousin passed away and I got the bedroom suite that I showed you, I also got 3 big filing cabinets. And my oldest cousin was supposed to maintain the Moran records, and he never did anything. It was obvious when I opened the cabinets. But my grandfather had said when I was a little boy, he said, "Hugh, someday I want you to be a judge, and you're going to have the Moran papers." Well, I'm not a judge, but I have the Moran papers, and I really cherish them. I'm going through and organizing them and sharing them with relatives, and I've actually piqued the curiosity of lots of relatives. This is what my grandfather referred to as Stonehenge, and it was built between 1860 and 1865 by Nathan Montgomery Moran. And the tower in the center, when Pauline Breck Moran, who died at 15 months, 3 months before her father, when she was very ill with tuberculosis, my grandfather, Hugh II, and his brother, Robert Breck Moran, they went up into the tower to pray for the health of Pauline Breck Moran, And my grandfather said that's as close as they could get to heaven. And you'll see in this picture that in the center down at the bottom, again, this isn't working right, but that Hugh the First is sitting on a millstone, which is on top of another millstone. And those millstones are today at Millstone Park on Main Street. And we went there today. So the gentleman in the dark suit, that's Hugh the First. If you go to the left, the person holding the horse, that's Comer, the Irish coachman. And then Jim is the name of the horse. And Nathan Montgomery Moran, my oldest great uncle, whom I never met, he died in 1952, and I was born the end of '53. So Nathan Montgomery Moran is on who'd be the second. He's on the horse, and to the right of Hugh the First, there's a little wagon, and Robert Breck Moran, my great uncle's in the wagon, and then the porch on the right. The lady in the dark dress is Jenny B. or Jane Todd Breck Moran, and that's my great-grandmother, and she was pregnant with my grandfather at the time. This is early 1881, and he was born in July of 1881. And then on the far right is Margaret the cook and Dixie the waitress, and then there's people on the balcony up on the second floor, and some servants off to the left. And the people on the balcony, I believe, are relatives, from the area. Now, there was 1,200 acres, and it took 14 miles of stone fences to go around it. When they built Stonehenge, they actually mined the clay on the property. You can still see the indentation. They built a kiln. They fired the bricks, and they built it between 1860 and 1865. 100 years later, when they took down Stonehenge, I was told that they had enough bricks to build the single-story house that's there now, and also at least five other houses. And I do have a couple of bricks, which actually your sister's life partner or boyfriend or whatever, he said I could take a brick back to California. So I have a brick, one of the bricks I took back to California.
Now, can I say something?
Yeah.
On the iron, on the window where the windows are.
Yeah.
On Lancaster Avenue, if you look at a couple of the houses that have the brick, also has the iron on the windows.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, there was a Mr. Green who said his mother had some of the ironwork in her backyard. That could be the same place. This is just a description of the people I just mentioned to you in the picture. Originally, John Cleveland Moran and Betsy Barnett Moran had built a cabin that was 50 yards southeast of Stonehenge, and there was what I read from my grandfather was, some kids were playing. They tied a burning rag to the tail of a dog. The dog ran into the cabin, burned down the cabin. They went back to Virginia briefly, and a two-story log cabin was built, but it's no longer there. And Nathan Montgomery Moran and Hugh the First were both born in that cabin, but it's no longer there. This is a picture. This is by Louis Schlegel, and you're probably all familiar with him, famous Richmond photographer. It's a picture of Hugh the First. He was born August 21st, 1849, died April 30th, 1886. He died of tuberculosis. He had tuberculosis for quite a while. And the two youngest children, William Rhodes Moran and Pauline Breck Moran, they also died of tuberculosis. Interestingly enough, the three older boys survived, but Nathan Montgomery Moran, he was born in 1878, in late 1878. He died in 1952, and they listed the cause of death as tuberculosis. So it was dormant in his system, his whole life. So Hugh the First, he died at age 36, but a very accomplished man for age 36. Here's another picture of Stonehenge, also known as the Moran Castle. And this is, just a different view of it. And you'll see the pictures, you'll see the trees growing more and more in the pictures. This is a portrait of Hugh the First that I have in our great room at my house. And I've had this and the other oil paintings restored. And he only lived to be age 36, but I had the same red beard until it turned white. And also, he had a mole right on the lower part of his forehead, and I have a first cousin who has a mole in the exact same place, but I tell her it's a beauty mark. But she has a mole in the exact same place.
That's Aurelius Ravenel.
Pardon me?
That's Aurelius Ravenel. Is
Oh, okay.
the artist.
Oh, thank you very much. I didn't know. When I had this restored, the lady who did the restoration of the picture and the frame, she said, "Hugh, I hope you know this is a museum quality frame." And I've seen some other pictures now of paintings that are still in our family, and it's the exact, there's one of Jane Briggs Todd Breck, and it's the exact same frame.
It was a package deal.
Yeah.
You said for your portrait and you got the frame.
Yeah, as my brother-in-law said, you buy one, you get the second for a nickel. So anyway, this is at my house in South Pasadena. Or sorry, it was South Pasadena, now it's Huntington Beach. Here's a shot of Colonel William Rhodes. He was the son of Judge Robert Rhodes. Colonel William Rhodes, also known as Billy in the Breck Bible, he was my third great-grandfather. And he lived at Woodlawn with his wife Pauline Clay Rhodes, and Woodlawn was a wedding gift of her father Green Clay, and they got married in 1819. Here's, again, a cousin took pity on me and gave me a really nice portrait. This is Colonel William Rhodes by Matthew Harris Jewett, and Rhodes, a Moran cousin of mine, has it in the middle of California. So I'm really happy to get a nice picture like that. Now, when Colonel William Rhodes and Pauline Clay were courting, it's a beautiful quote, and it's out of the History of Masonry in Madison County. And it says here, "The story of Colonel Rhodes' courtship is worthy of being preserved. He had many rivals, and it would seem could not get a favorable opportunity to press his suit. One evening, while his lady love was playing on her piano for a huge company, he whispered in her ear, 'Pauline, you know I love you. If you intend to marry me, play Come Haste to the Wedding. If you do not, play the Rogue's March.' Instantly, the beautiful hands began to make the piano ring with the melody of that beautiful old air, and his joy was triumphant." And I just think that's wonderful and classic. So, and he was 25 years old when they got married. This is the return address on an envelope for Stonehenge, and it's for my great-grandfather, Hugh I, and it says, "Breeder of Shorthorn cattle, Shropshire and South Down sheep, Silver Creek, Kentucky." This is a map of the Moran land at Silver Creek. This is a deed from 1812, and I have it with me. I have all the deeds going back to 1812. This is the oldest one, and this is the Barnett's deeding in 1812, 990 acres of land, divided 610 acres to William and 380 acres to James Barnett. So, like I said, we're a family of pack rats. This is the backside of the same deed. This is the Kentucky Colonel Certificate signed by Preston H. Leslie, the governor at the time, in 1873. And it's from March of 1873. I have it framed in my office. And he was only 23 years old at the time. So I know different people get the Kentucky Colonel designation for different reasons. But I thought it was pretty impressive that he was only 23 years old at the time. This is when Hugh I married, he married Jane Todd Breck. And this is the Breck house at 312 Lancaster Avenue. It was built in 1832. And still there, still trying to get in to see it, but I haven't been successful yet. They, previous to that, lived at 212 Lancaster Avenue, and I'm going to be able to view that house. Here's the front entrance to the Breck house, and it's a Federalist style, so it has the equal and offsetting dimensions on both sides as far as windows, and this is next to the front door, and it just indicates it's the Breck house established 1832. It's to the right of the front window. This is an oil painting that's still in my family. It's of Robert Levi Breck as a young man. It's just a very beautiful painting, and I just received this photo recently. Here's another picture of Robert Levi Breck as a young man, and with the hat and riding gloves and riding crop. He was born in 1827, as was his wife, Martha Rhodes, who was the daughter of Colonel William Rhodes and Pauline Clay Rhodes. They got married in 1847. He was as Dean said, he was the first chancellor of Central University from 1874 to 1880. And prior to that, he was the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church on Main Street. And in 1880, he retired to San Luis Obispo, California for his health and his breathing, and he lived another 35 years. And he passed away in 1915, and he lived long enough to baptize my father after they came back from being missionaries in Shanghai. This is Martha Rhodes Breck. This is the wife of Robert Levi Breck, and this is Martha Rhodes Breck as a young woman. This is from the Antebellum Portraiture book, and this is Martha Clay Rhodes. I believe that I have a cousin in Florida who has the original painting, and I'm still trying to get a copy of it. But they were married at Woodlawn. Everybody was married at Woodlawn. Everybody was born at Woodlawn. It was a very, very important house for everything that happened in the family. This is actually a trunk that belonged to Mrs. Robert Levi Breck, or Martha Rhodes Breck. And my sister has this trunk in Connecticut, and she's happy to have it find an appropriate home in Kentucky if it ever comes to that. Another picture of the trunk, and it's what they call a bonnet trunk.
Ooh, do you have a home?
And it still has the original straps in it, and just the paper in the bottom has been replaced. And if you look at this picture, you see there's 3 1850s original bocce balls in the bottom of the trunk. Now, when I first looked at this, I asked my sister, I said, what are those things? And actually, those are just what you put the bonnet on both sides and the bottom. But I couldn't figure it out. Now, this is a cake knife that's been in my family. I believe it could be a wedding present to Martha Rhodes Breck in 1847. It's coin silver, and this is the actual knife. And it's something, once I realized what it was and could read the initials, I locked it up. So anyway, that's something I brought back I couldn't take it on the plane, but I put it in with the luggage underneath. So Martha Rhodes Breck, they had 7 children, she and Robert Levi Breck. She died right after childbirth of the youngest daughter, Belle Breck. And it was 27 days after giving birth to Belle Breck in 1865, she passed away. So Robert Levi Breck, all of his children were with Martha Rhodes Breck. And then he remarried later on, but from what I've heard, the children didn't care for the second wife, and they always referred to her as Mrs. Breck. And then I've read where Robert Levi Breck would say, Mommy would like you to have this, and he was referring to the second wife, but the kids still wanted to call her Mrs. Breck. Here's the initials for the cake knife that I just showed you. And then this is from the Beers map from 1876, and just a listing of the Moran lands. And I have a copy of the Beers map that I framed in my office in mid-1800s wood from Kentucky, so I treasure that as well. This is from the Breck Bible, and this is the page that indicates the marriages, and it's the marriage of Martha Green Rhodes, July 20th, 1847, to Robert Levi Breck at Woodlawn. This is a picture of Jane Todd Breck, known as Jenny B. or Ma Moran. She's the wife of Hugh I, and they got married January 3rd, 1878. Now, what's interesting about this is the Madison County marriages page, and it indicates that they got married January 3rd, 1878. What's interesting is that the bond that was posted, in case Hugh the First would run away and escape the scene. The bond that was posted, it was signed by Waller Bennett. This is a brooch that Jenny B. or Mom Moran had, and it's my cousin. Now, she was also known as Gingy. He had another name, and so I have a cousin Gingy who's in Brooklyn, and so she took this very nice picture of the brooch and just sent it to me. And you can see the box that she has it in. It's from Kitts and Warren or Warney from Louisville, and I've looked them up, and they were, silversmiths and did jewelry at that period of time in Louisville. Here's a picture of Jane Todd Breck, or Jenny B. Would be my great grandmother. After her husband died, she moved out to San Luis Obispo with the older 3 boys to get away from the tuberculosis, and she outlived her husband by 61 years. He died in 1886. She died in 1947. And she had been born in Macon, Georgia, when Robert Levi Breck had established a Presbyterian church in Macon, Georgia, and she was born there in 1852. I just think that's astounding that she outlived her husband by 61 years. This is from 1883, and it says at the top, Treasurer's Office, Mill Grove and Paint Lick Creek Turnpike Company. And it's a share certificate for 80 shares made out to Hugh A. Moran, Hugh the First. It's signed by Hugh A. Moran as the president, and it's attested to by Hugh A. Moran as the treasurer. So they had individual shares for all of those, and it was to be a total of $2,000. So it's, I guess, one of the original toll roads, and it was between Mill Grove and Paint Lick. This is something that Tom Black sent to me recently, which is great. There was a document that had to be filed with the court, and it was, I think it was the Judge Miller at the top, and it was in 1879. It was basically like a balance sheet that didn't balance for Hugh the First. And on the left it said they had cash on hand of $61. They had a note payable for $475. They owed the gatekeeper $91 and approximately $16 owed for gravel. So, and it's respectfully submitted by Hugh A. Moran, November 15th, 1879. This is from the transcribed sessional records of Silver Creek Presbyterian Church. This is from 1883 to 1886, and it indicates the baptism of Hugh II, my grandfather, and also the death of Hugh I in 1886, his father. This is the Kirksville Presbyterian Church that existed between 1880 and 1950, and Hugh I was an elder. Jenny B., his wife, donated the altar chairs, and Dean Whitaker gave me this picture. And eventually it was used as a hay barn. That was the last thing it was used for. And then it just collapsed, I think, in 1950. This is an obituary, one of the obituaries of Hugh I, and he died April 30th, 1886. And I have the original obituaries, and they're still very easy to read. But there's some interesting things that is said in there, and very complimentary of him. And he only lived to be age 36. But he was a church elder, and then he was the ruling elder. He was the director of the Agricultural Association, and I believe he was the correspondent for the agricultural organization. It says with the department at Washington, and I don't know if that's Washington and Lee University or Washington, D.C., but it said Washington. He was also a director of the Madison National Bank. He was a director of the Richmond and Lancaster Turnpike Road Company. He was a curator at Central University. And when he came back from Europe after his father died, he was going to be a history lecturer at Central University, but he couldn't fulfill that role because he needed to take over the family farm. He was the only child, and his father had passed away. So this is the second obituary, and they say he could have accomplished so much if he hadn't died at age 36 of tuberculosis, and he had been in ill health with tuberculosis for quite a while before he passed. He had also gone to Texas to try to get cures and just didn't work out. But Hugh I died in 1886. This is the Moran monument in the Moran plot for Hugh I. And then later on, when his wife Jenny Breck died in 1947, her ashes were brought back and also placed there in the Moran plot. This is a picture that my cousin gave me when he was in Richmond in about 1960. It's the same Moran monument, gravestones for Nathan Montgomery Moran and Mary Jane Anderson Moran. And then in the front, you see the two small stones. That's for William Rhodes Moran, who died at it's either 3 days or 5 days. I've seen different versions. And then on the right is the stone for Pauline Breck Moran, and she was named Pauline after Pauline Clay. And my sister was named Pauline Breck Moran also. Now she's got a married name, but she grew up as Pauline Breck Moran. And my twin was Robert Breck Moran. Now this is a broadside, and it's from the auction May 20th, 1886, after Hugh I passed. And they were selling 38 yearling steers. They were selling steers, sheep, pigs, lard, lots of different things. And M.F. Arbuckle, and that's Betsy's great-grandfather, he was the guardian for Jenny B. Moran at those times. In those times, the women didn't have any rights. So Jenny B. Moran, my great-grandmother, and the 3 older boys, they had a guardian, and it was M.F. Arbuckle, Millard Fillmore Arbuckle. And I have to say, I've read many dozens of letters from him back and forth with Jenny B. Moran, and I think he was a really good relative, and he acted in the best interest of the family. And they were selling Moran land from 1886 all the way up to 1930. It wasn't until 1930 they were finished, and I have about 60 pages of letters that document everything. And he did buy some of the Moran land for the Arbuckle family, but he always tried to get the highest dollar that he could. And if he couldn't get anybody to buy it for a reasonable price, he did buy some of the land. But I think he was a wonderful guardian for my family. This is part 2 of the same broadside. It's the bottom part. And it says also brood mares, fillies, young horses. And you'll see 56 extra good stock hogs, some sows and pigs, large quantities of bacon and lard. And if you were paying $25 or under, it was cash. All sums over that amount, a credit would be allowed, but it had to be paid by January 1st of 1887. And the purchaser had to execute notes. So you can see M.F. Arbuckle, and he was the guardian for J.B. Moran. That's Jenny Breck Moran. That's May 4th, 1886. This is another auction that was later on, October 5th, 1886. And it says Shorthorn cattle, trotting horses, and Shropshire sheep. And again, Millard Fillmore Arbuckle was the administrator. And then this is a livestock sale. This is I have all the original documents. This is the article that was in the paper advertising the livestock sale, and in the return address envelope that I found the newspaper article in. This is a summary of what things were sold for at the auction, and you'll see that a lot of the animals was sold for 25 cents, maybe $1. There was a bull where they got $4, but it was at the bottom, you can see it was a total of $40 they got from that auction. And so in those days, 25 cents for a horse or a cow or a sheep, that was the going price. Here are the small stones that are in the front of the Moran plot in the Richmond Cemetery. On the left is William Rhodes Moran. On the right is Pauline Breck Moran. Here's Pauline Breck Moran. She died at 15 months and 3 months before her father. William Rhodes Moran died at 5 days, and he died April 8, 1883. This is a page from the Breck Bible, and it shows the births of the Moran children between 1878, that would have been Nathan Montgomery Moran, born in late 1878, and then 1884, and that's when Pauline Breck Moran was born. And then here's births, again, all at Woodlawn, and this is the home of Colonel William Rhodes and Pauline Clay Rhodes. Here's a picture right after Hugh I died. These are the 3 older boys who survived the tuberculosis. My grandfather's in the center. Hugh II. On the left is Robert Breck Moran, my great uncle, and on the right is Nathan Montgomery Moran, the oldest son. He was born in late 1878. Robert Breck Moran was born December 31st, 1879, and my grandfather July 16th, 1881. It's another picture of the Moran boys, and my grandfather's on the far right, Nathan's in the center, and Robert's on the left. And it's approximately 1884. Another picture, and this is when they had already gotten out to San Luis Obispo, and Robert Breck Moran's on the left. Nathan, who was the oldest, is seated, and then my grandfather's on the right. This is my grandfather, and he was, when they got out to California, and Robert Breck Moran married Edna Venable, and her father was Judge Venable, very famous in San Luis Obispo. And there was a fancy dress ball given in 1888. So that's my grandfather as a 7-year-old, and we still have that outfit in the family, and my sister in Connecticut has it. This is a stock certificate from 1889 from the First National Bank of Richmond, and it's made out to Jenny B. Jenny Moran. It's a share certificate, and you've seen this in the quarterly magazines for the Madison County Historical Society. Here's a picture from approximately 1896, and this is when Jenny B. went to Europe with her 3 sons. And on the left is Robert Breck Moran and Jenny B., the mother, and then Nathan Montgomery Moran and my grandfather, Hugh II, on the far right. This is a picture of my grandfather, Hugh Anderson Moran Jr., around age 16 in 1897. Here's when my grandfather got married. He married Irene May Hornby in Redlands, June 7th, 1911, and this is the wedding invitation where Irene May and Mr. Hugh Anderson Moran were getting married. This is my grandmother in her wedding dress the day she got married in 1911. This is when, on their honeymoon, they came to Silver Creek. And this picture is at Oakley, which is on Midway Road in Versailles. And we actually just went there yesterday. And she's standing under a tree at Oakley, and that's my grandmother in 1911. And then Sally Watson Breck Broadhead was my great aunt, the sister of Jenny B. Moran. And her husband was Lucas Broadhead, who was the trainer at the Woodburn farm training the horses. And we actually met in Alexander yesterday. I went to Woodburn and didn't get shot. I actually was called cousin. And Lucas Broadhead was so taken by my grandmother. She's a very beautiful woman. He offered to buy the property across the road if my grandfather would stay in Versailles and be a farmer and not go off and just be a missionary in China. So anyway, my grandfather still ended up being a missionary in China, Siberia, and Russia. And that's my grandmother. It's on their honeymoon. This is Oakley at that time. It still looks very, very much the same, but this picture would be probably from the 1940s. The home was built in 1903. Lucas Broadhead died in 1914, and we were just there yesterday, and it's actually up for sale now. But I have to tell you, the pictures on the internet look much nicer than looking in the windows because they stage everything and they have all this wonderful furniture and lighting. And that's not what you see when you go there. But it's up for sale for $1.9 million with 31 acres. This is also from Oakley, and that'd be Sally Breck and possibly Lucas Broadhead. It's a picture that goes way back. And here's another Christmas card of Oakley, which again is on Midway Road in Versailles. And this is a Christmas card. It would be after Lucas Broadhead died. And it says from Sally B. Broadhead, which would be Sally Breck Broadhead. And she was born in 1854, 2 years after my great-grandmother. But she also lived to be, she lived into the 1940s. At least 3 of the kids did. This is on the honeymoon for my grandparents. And you'll see there's like a Model A type car on the left of the picture of my grandparents, and you see the trees are getting bigger and bigger, for Stonehenge. This is on their honeymoon, 1911. This is the Kentucky River. And it's fun to see pictures from that time, and I know Dean and the people in the Historical Society are very interested. This is also the Kentucky River, and if you look in the center of the picture, you'll see the bridge going over the river. And this is again from the honeymoon. This is the birth announcement from my father. He was born in Shanghai, May 30th, 1912. His father was a missionary in China at the time. So right after they got married and they had their honeymoon, then they went back to Shanghai. And so they got married in June of 1911, and my father was born May 30th, 1912. That's a picture of my father when he was born in Shanghai, China, 1912. There's a picture of my father with his father, Hugh II, in China. And my grandfather was secretary of the International YMCA. He's a Presbyterian minister, missionary in China, Russia, and Siberia. And Hugh III, my father, was born there. And then after they came back from China, my grandfather was head of theology at Cornell. There's a picture of my grandfather when in World War I, when he was secretary of the YMCA, and he was in the Siberian prison camps. We also have drawings from the prison camps that he did. And this is when he was in Russia, 1917 to 1918. And until recently, I had the sealskin gloves still, and you can see the probably bearskin coat. And he was the first Rhodes Scholar from Stanford in 1904 to study at Oxford. After you'll see the older gentleman with the white beard, that's Robert Levi Breck, and he's holding my father in 1913 when my father and his parents came back from Shanghai. Robert Levi Breck baptized my father and all the younger cousins. And the lady, second from the right, that's Jenny B. Moran. It looks like she'd be the wife, but that's actually the daughter of Robert Levi Breck. On the far right is my grandmother, Irene May Hornby Moran, and then the wife of Nathan Montgomery is on the far left. And then those are the three sons, Robert Breck Moran, his wife Edna, Nathan Montgomery Moran, who's a lawyer in San Francisco, and my grandfather. And Robert Breck Moran, he was an oil engineer, and he discovered a lot of the oil fields in South America. So Robert Levi Breck, he passed away at age 86, 35 years after he came to California for his health. Here's another picture on the lower far right. That's Jenny B. Moran in her later years. It's from Christmas 1942, 5 years before she passed at 94. And that's her son, Nathan Montgomery Moran, at the top center, and his daughter to the left, to the right, in between the two, and her husband. And then the lady at the far left is the wife of Nathan Montgomery Moran, Elise. This is part of the Breck Bible, and it's recording the death of Jenny Breck Moran at age 94, May 19th, 1947. And my grandfather would have made the entries, and he had the book. Last year, I had the newer gravestone on the right made and put in place for my great uncle, whom I never met, Nathan Montgomery Moran. His ashes were sent back after he passed in 1952. His ashes were sent back and buried in the Moran plot, but there wasn't any gravestone, and there was a gravestone for everybody else. So I wanted to have some closure there for him. And I told his grandchildren about it, and they had no idea about the story or anything. This is a close-up of the gravestone that was just put in there a year ago, and the writing is exactly the same as the other two stones of his younger siblings who passed away at an early age. And it says, son of H.A. and J.B. Moran, November 17th, 1878 to June 16th, 1952. This is my father. This is from 1978. It's the Pasadena, California Bar Association photo. And he's Hugh Anderson Moran III, born in 1912. He died in 1987. So that's my father in Pasadena. He was an attorney. This is from 2015. It's just looking one way at Silver Creek and then looking the other direction at Silver Creek. And that, I believe, is where Moran's Mill would have been on the creek, just near Stonehenge. This is the house that's currently the single-story house in place of the Moran Castle that was taken down in the 1960s. And Jill Curry's here. She's the daughter of Jim Curry. I think he passed away a couple of years before I first came here, and I was told that I would have really enjoyed getting to know him and talking to him. And fortunately, I didn't meet him. And again, the bricks were saved and used for this house and 5 other houses. It's on a bluff, and from there and in the tower that was above, I'm sure you had a wonderful view of the rolling land of the Morans. This is again from 2015. You can see the beautiful, fertile land that was originally the Moran land. Again from 2015. And then when I came back here in 2015, I got an invitation to a Burnham Bennett reunion, and my first cousin Jennifer, who's second from the left, she's the one that has the mole on her forehead. She got us an invitation, and she said, "Hugh, I hate to disappoint you, but I don't think we're related to many of these people." And I wrote her back and I said, "Jennifer, I just want you to know we're related to all of these people." So on my left on the far left is Jim Ferguson, who's here tonight, and then Jennifer Meyer, Molly Ferguson, his twin sister, who's not here tonight, Marion Burnham Ferguson. She's here tonight. That's the younger sister of Jim and Molly. And then Marty Exline, who's here, Betsy, who's here. And Marty and Betsy are Moran Arbuckles, and then now with their married names, and I'm on the far right. I joined the Boonesboro Society, and originally joined it with the name of Green Clay, and then Vicki Whitaker told me I actually had 4 branches of the family at Fort Boonesboro with Daniel Boone, so it was reissued. And it's for John Anderson, James Anderson, General Green Clay, and Colonel Robert Rhodes. So this is a certificate that I treasure, and I framed it in mid-1800s Kentucky wood that I had. Vicki Whitaker also helped me apply for Sons of the American Revolution, and well, that comes in a second. This is the application for Society of Boonesboro, and that goes from me back to Green Clay. Here's my certificate for the Sons of the American Revolution, and I have my lapel pin and my tie on from the Sons of the American Revolution. I'm very proud of that, and I'm also going to try to become a colonial warrior in January if they'll allow me. But this is taken, using the name of Green Clay and going back to his participation in the American Revolution. And Vicki and I, she's the genealogist, we're 11th cousins 3 times removed. So, and as my friend Max says, I'm related to everybody in Kentucky. So this is the Sons of the American Revolution application from going back to Green Clay. And this is a picture of my brother, my twin brother, who just passed a few months ago. He's on the left, Robert Breck Moran. I'm on the right, and this is one of the few pictures I could find where I wasn't crying. I was always the one crying. And I'm not crying in this picture, but everybody can usually tell because I'm the one who's crying. So this would have been from 1954. We were born in December of 53. And when my brother passed away, Vicki and Dean Whitaker were very nice and made my twin brother a posthumous member of the Society of Boonesboro. And it's dated June 6th, 2019, which is D-Day, the anniversary of D-Day, and my brother was very fond of anything to do with World War II. So he died on the anniversary of D-Day. And that's my brother from 2 years ago. In 2008, he had a massive stroke and brain bleed, and he couldn't walk or talk since 2008. And this is when his first grandchild was born, Luke, born 2 years ago. He just turned 2 in September. So that's my brother from 2 years ago. This is kind of a teaser picture for a future talk, if I'm allowed back. This is a photograph of it would be an oil painting of green clay. And he was born August 14, 1757 in Virginia. He died October 31st, 1828 at age 71. He had emigrated from Virginia to Kentucky, and as you all know, he was a surveyor. And this is just the back of the photo that is where my aunt had written, that it was green clay, but I recognized him right away. And that's it. Thank you. I also want to thank Sandy. Sandy has put up with me for the last year, and I've spent hundreds of hours putting together all these things.
It's wonderful because I knew he was doing something that he really loved, and he was getting lots and lots of information and developing new friendships and friends, and that,
Yeah, so she was very patient because I was gone a lot, and I could be alone in my office, totally in heaven, just doing this. I really enjoyed it. So, does anybody have any questions? Dean.
You got Matt Cox here. This question here has got to do with furniture. How did they get all that furniture from Kentucky to California without being broken?
Went by train.
By train.
Yeah, as my cousin Jim Ferguson said, well, did they take it by plane? I'm like, no. So anyway, it went by train, and then by then it would have to go by wagon. So it would have to go by wagon to the train station, and then once you got out to San Francisco, you'd have to take a wagon. Actually, they went from San Francisco to San Luis Obispo by boat. And so they would have put it on a boat and taken the furniture down to San Luis Obispo. Interestingly enough, Stonehenge had indoor plumbing, and that was, indoor plumbing in the 1880s. When my great-grandmother went to San Luis Obispo and moved in with her father, Robert Levi Brick, she was back to outdoor plumbing again. And heating up water in a big tub for everybody to take a bath. And so I guess they just kind of followed the Indians to California, and again, didn't have the indoor plumbing there.
So all this furniture that you refer to as Moran, the armoire, the beds and all that, they were in the house?
Yes.
In the Capitol Stonehenge?
Yes.
So have you all retained ownership of most of the furniture that was in that house, or your family, I'm saying?
Well, the furniture I have is about 1/16 of what was divided up among the family. But I think we're all pack rats. I think we've all inherited that gene, and so I've seen a lot of furniture in the last week or so. Like I said, I have my cousins crawling under tables and behind armoires looking for something. I think a lot of it is still in the family. Not all of my cousins are super interested in family history, but they have much greater interest now, a lot of them, than they did a year ago, just because I've been helping them understand what they have and where it came from. Because I've also been trying to track, I have estate inventories, and like the Cassius Clay auction, and I try to track items that are still in my family, and it's interesting. There's some very interesting pieces that were made by Porter Clay and in Whitehall, and before that it was known as Claremont, and I think we've preserved a lot of things, and I think I'm the right person to go through all the documents because I really enjoy what I'm doing, and I've scanned and emailed out a lot of documents to cousins, and then when I have original documents that came from that side of the family, I just scan them for my records, and then I give the original documents back to the person in that branch of the family who's actually interested in the process. So it's very interesting for me. Any other questions? I also want to say Matt Cox has been very helpful, and he's helped me identify furniture. He's very uninterested in anything before 1830, but he's put up with me and identified some things that are newer than 1830. And if at some point Mac takes on disciples, I want to be first in line. So, thank you.